Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Earlier this month, the government released new guidance regarding the teaching of relationships, sex and health education, or RSHE, in an attempt to prevent young children being exposed to inappropriate content. The guidance says that sex education should be taught no earlier than year 5, when pupils are 9. And Education Secretary Gillian Keegan says gender identity should not be taught to children as uncontested fact at any age. So Sam Murray is a Conservative county councillor in Suffolk who has spoken out on this issue, and she joins me now. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi, Sam. Hi. Very grateful for you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start by talking about your own experience, because you have children.
Yep.
They have been taught these various things. What did you do about it?
Well, actually, I caught it before they were taught it.
Right.
So, yeah, I was become aware of the situation, wanted to have a look at the curriculum. The school reluctantly sent out the documentation, and I said I'm not having any of it.
What kind of things were in the documentation?
Well, very young children were being taught. Well, he said on one hand it was gender stereotyping portrayed by the media, and on the other hand it was gender ideology, which I said was a conflict in itself, because gender ideology is all about gender stereotyping.
Yes.
Wasn't received very well. And then there was really inappropriate content for quite young girls, such as wet dreams, and that content that I just didn't think was appropriate.
I've spoken to some parents who've had some real issues with this, because they've been shown sometimes graphic materials.
Yeah.
They've tried to have their children withdrawn from the class. They've been told you can't have your children withdrawn from the classes. But is that actually accurate?
Yeah, I get fed back to me that some schools are saying you can't withdraw because I have a profile, I spoke about it publicly, and
yes.
Therefore the school thought, right, here we go, I don't want to deal with it, fine, you can withdraw. But even now, they're still giving me the documentation and saying, what parts of the curriculum do you want us to teach?
Yes.
Because we think it's about extremism or something. I said, no, I just don't want you teaching it, because I can't trust that you won't include certain elements, that just filter it through. So I've said no to any of it.
And there's a lot of people who have made the point that this is probably against the law anyway, in terms of the Education Act, which says you can't teach politically partisan material. Yeah. And this is very much ideologically partisan.
Yeah.
So the idea that you're teaching what is effectively a belief system as though it was uncontested fact, that's really what you're objecting to here,
Well,
right?
yeah, and actually at such a young age, because, you know, when we talk about relationships, which I have no problem with, like different, you know, mummy and mummy, daddy, daddy, you know, everyone's family circumstances can look different. And so exploring that, I have no problem with. But then when you're seeping in a contested ideology with such young minds who are trying to work out who they are as a person anyway, that's when I say no.
How many teachers do you think are going along with this? Because I know in a lot of cases the schools tend to invite activist groups in who have pre-prepared materials. A lot of the time the headmaster or headmistress doesn't know what's in the materials, they just let it go ahead. But sometimes it can be very dodgy stuff.
Well, I think it's, you know, who's teaching the teachers?
Right.
And so if you have people, the external sources that come in and teach the teachers, you know, this is the terminology that you need to use now. And as a society, we're moving at such a quick pace, everyone's so worried about saying the wrong thing.
Yes.
That, you know, it is those people that I question their qualifications coming into the schools, teaching the teachers, and this is how you teach the curriculum. That creates a bad teaching, full stop, doesn't it?
Yes, and you're a councillor, so you've actually been able to raise this on a public forum. How has that been received whenever you've done this? Yeah,
so I've raised it several times with members of Parliament at, you know, dinners and things that we get to go to, and they say, yeah, 100% agree with you, we'll look into this. I've raised, you know, the increase of open plan toilets that are being thrown on us like they're anti-bullying, but actually they're not. They're just gender neutral, but they're worried about people going all, you know, funny about it. So they're reframing it, and, oh no, there absolutely needs to be a private space for young children. Well, I'm telling you there aren't, but nothing's being done about it, and it's just happening at such a quick pace.
So this is the problem. We've got the guidelines now from the government, which a lot of people would argue are long overdue, and they should have been there a long time ago. Yeah. But is it going to change? Because my worry is that a lot of activists are so deeply embedded in all of our major institutions, but particularly when it comes to education, and they react in such a hostile, ferocious way if people challenge them. Are they really going to give up without a fight?
No, and I think it's you know, I don't want to say that we've gone so far we can't bring it back.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think you've spoken about it in the past as well. This is a social contagion now, and it's very difficult once it's at full flow and the pace that it's going to then pull it back. And I think that some educators are too scared to speak out. They've spoken to me privately that they don't want to teach this.
Yes.
Or they're afraid that, you know, the pupil themselves who is identified as whatever has all the cards, that they're worried that they're going to, lose their job as a result of this. So there's a lot of fear in play.
Yes.
And when you're afraid of your job, your reputation and everything else, then I think, people stay quiet.
And then you're a Conservative councillor, but a lot of people, or some people from Labour, have also raised this issue as well. Rosie Duffield, most notably.
Yeah.
But of course, she hasn't had any apologies whatsoever from Keir Starmer about the way that she's been treated by some fellow parliamentarians.
Yeah.
So this is something that crosses over from left to right. This is really not about left and right, is it?
No, it's not. It's not, political at all in that aspect. There's a lot of us out there, and I know Rosie, and we want to support each other, because actually this is the protection of children. And that shouldn't have a label of a party at all. And we get labelled far right for saying this. Actually, no, we're saying that our priority, and it should be everyone's priority, is to protect children and keep children as children, because we know from the Cass report what the eventual thing that will happen, and that will be the sterilisation of our children.
So you mentioned the Cass review, and really that has been a game changer, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And even in the interim Cass review, you had the point that social transitioning, in other words, referring to a pupil as opposite-sex pronouns or a different name, that was not a neutral act, and that risks embedding in this self-perception, which can lead to all sorts of medical issues later on. Do you think, though, with the rigorous evidence of the Cass review, that people are going to have to change their minds on this?
I think there needs to be an appetite for it. I think people have realised that it's gone so far now. It's how do you, we see this with lots of other scandals, how do you then say, I was wrong?
Yes.
And I come from this from doing a complete 180 anyway, because I had a completely different opinion until I thought, well, I'm going to read up on what the others are saying, and then I changed my opinion on it. So I was a couple of years ago going, well, let people live. Why are you coming from it? And I was saying all this stuff that is now said at me,
Yes.
and I just happened to read a couple of books and then thought, oh, actually, there's something in it.
So that's a real issue, isn't it? Because I think a lot of the people who are such cheerleaders for gender identity ideology actually know very little about it.
Yeah, they do.
And if they were to... And I wonder if sometimes they think, I better not look into it in case I have to change my mind, because they see the way that people are, like J.K. Rowling, are demonised for speaking the truth on this.
Yeah, and it's scary, because even at a low level, and I've spoken to my Member of Parliament is Tom Hunt, and he's quite active as well on it, and he said, we both said that the activists that we've had to face, and we do as politicians on very low level, there's nothing quite like the TRAs. It's a very...
Trans rights activists.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
It's a very scary mob, actually,
right.
When you're on their radar, and I've faced that myself.
And of course, the common accusation is that any concerns must be evidence of hatred, fascism even, bigotry, all of the rest of it.
Yeah.
And that's something that no one wants to be accused of.
No, and, the threat of you should have your kids taken away from you because you come from a place of hate, that's, what I've experienced, and it's, that's unnerving. My kids are my world.
Yes. Do you think that, let's assume Labour are going to get in next time. I think they probably are. Do you think... What's going to happen with this situation? Because Starmer has already suggested that they want to make it easier for people to change their gender.
Yeah.
Are they going to try and roll back this guidance from the Tories?
I think that will be the greatest tragedy that we will see, is that, if Labour do come in and they do what they've said they were going to do, then that will be a huge tragedy for our children. And that's my main focus. What you do as an adult, I think that's a completely different issue. And as a women's rights activist, I have a different issue there. But it will be the safety of our children. And so we really need to think about that. I don't know whether, because there's so many people speaking up about it, whether we will, as parents, allow this to happen. But my plea is to parents is to look at what's being taught in schools and really, really think about the consequences. Because we all come from a place of love. Even parents who support social transitioning, you're all coming from a place of love. We're just doing our best as parents, but please really think about the consequences of it, because some of this stuff is really irreversible. And speak to, look at the interviews from detransitioners and the pain and suffering that they've experienced as well. And as soon as parents go, you're not coming for my children, that's when the great power is. So Labour or no Labour, so long as parents can speak out and say, you're not doing this to our children, I think we can overcome it.
Sam Murray, thanks ever so much for joining me.
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. So next on Free Speech Nation, author Tamandra Harkness will be here to tell us about her new book, Technology is Not the Problem, the ultimate history of our relationship with technology and how it has shaped our world today. We'll be back in just a few minutes.